we moved house when I was 4, so that's a cut-off point in my life. I know that things had happened before we moved house. I would have been 3 or thereabouts. Anything beyond, I was 5 or older. And my oldest recollection is sitting on the front doorsteps of our house, and men were digging up the pavement. I don't know what they were doing that for, probably putting in some sort of supply, water or gas or electricity. And I was sitting there with my golliwog, and they offered to bury it for me in the trench. And I fled in terror into the house, lest they should do this.
How old were you then?
I was about 3. It was a terrible thing to consider. Before we were ready to move house, we stayed with a friend of my father, a colleague of his, Stan Pester. And Stan Pester had one son who was about a year older than me, and Jack Pester was at school already. And one day I decided I was going to go to school with Jack Pester and see what school was like. So I went. And he said, "You can't come." I said, "I'm coming." And being strong-minded, I went with him, and I sat in the class, and the teacher, I suppose, recognised me as a stranger and was quite content to let me stay. And we were in a large room containing, I would think, the whole of the infants department in this school. There would be about 48 in each of 2 classes in one large room with no division between us. I don't remember now what Jack's class were doing, but the next class interested me because they were learning by rote, which is the way one learned in those days. And they were learning the poem Abu Ben Adam. And so they were chanting it, and I chanted it with them. And to this day I can recite Abu Ben Adam. I've never seen it written down in printed form in any way. I shan't recite it for you now, but I can do should you wish.
We may do it later on.
Yeah. Right. So there we are. So that was my introduction to education. When I started school, I didn't go to Jack's school because my father didn't like it. I went to a private school run by French nuns who had been expelled from France for some religious sin and had come across to this country and had set up a school as a way of making a living. And they did an interesting thing. They owned a large amount of land around their convent, and although they were quite happy that they should be sold for building or whatever, no form of business could be conducted. Or if it was conducted, there should be no indication that it was happening. For example, if you were a doctor, you could have your practice, but you couldn't put a plate on your door to show that you were a doctor.
Right.
The opposite the convent, and we could look into it from our house, was the Plymouth Albion Rugby Club. And the Plymouth Albion Rugby Club were not allowed to have a bar because that was business. They could play rugby, but they couldn't drink. Yes. And that was ruinous for a rugby club, as you can well imagine.